The school shooting in Newtown, Connecticut is a sobering reminder that sometimes guns fall into the hands of people who should not have them. But what if there was a way to find out exactly who in your neighborhood owns a gun? The Journal News, a local newspaper in New York's Westchester County, published an interactive map of the names and addresses of every person who holds a gun permit. As you can see, the map is made up of tens of thousands of dots representing people who own gun permits in Westchester and Rockland counties. By the click of a dot, you can see the name and the address of each owner. The paper's calling it a public service, but some people are furious. So is this fair game for anyone wanting to exercise their Second Amendment right? Or is it an outrageous invasion of privacy? Let's put that through the spin cycle. And I gotta say, guys, this really rankles for me. I mean, I think no matter where you stand on the gun debate, publishing people's names and home addresses in this context is really inappropriate. And look, I understand that a lot of this information is publicly available if you go out and search for it. But to me, this smacks of sort of naming and shaming responsible gun owners and making them seem as if they're criminals. And frankly, you know, I think this is a mistake that liberals make in this debate a lot. It feels like we're conflating people who own guns with people who are criminals, and that's why we lose on this issue a lot. And I'd say, you know, if the information was publicly available of Muslim Americans after 9/11, would it be okay to publish their names and addresses and make them targets? I think this is totally unacceptable.
Obviously, that's a false equivalence. Being Muslim does not have a net impact on me. You or whoever owning a gun has a potential negative impact on me. I don't see why you would call it shaming when, you know, you have a gun for potential deterrence possibilities. Now that's even been improved, so people know don't go there because they have a gun, they might be able to do something. Look, I have the right to know, I think, who has a gun and who doesn't. Maybe I don't want to go there. Maybe I don't want my kids going there, or maybe I want to go home after a couple of drinks. After a couple of drinks are had. We know that guns are generally not used against intruders. Guns are much more likely to be used against friends and family. And if I want to make the decision that I don't want to be around that home where there's a gun, where things could escalate to another level, then I have the right to make that choice. Look, we treat guns as a private choice, but they are really a public matter, and that having a gun impacts the community, the local community, the national community. You know, we have a chart here of leading causes of violence-related deaths in America. From 5 to 9 to 55 to 64, almost every category, the #1 cause of death is a gun. I should be able to know, hey, there's a gun there. I choose to not go there. And if you have it for deterrence, you should want people to know, don't come in here because we're packing.
Yeah, but it's a totally different thing to make that choice yourself, to advertise that you have a gun. And look, Adam Lanza, for example, he stole his guns from his mother, so his name wouldn't have even been.
Hold on. There's the point, Krystal, I think. Nancy Lanza would have been a law-abiding gun owner, and yet I think I would like to know, if I was moving out to the suburbs with my family, I'd like to know if the next-door neighbor had a stockpile of weapons like Nancy Lanza had. I think that's a decision that if you're moving into a community, if you're moving into a particular neighborhood, I do think there's valuable information there. If you have kids, or just in general, if you're going to live in an area, it's valuable to know, hey, are there lots of privately owned firearms in this area? Maybe I'm going to think twice about living here. I do think there's a serious issue. I'm kind of in the middle on this, on the ethics of this. I do think there's a serious issue where at least you have to really pause and think about it when you start naming individual names and giving out personal information like this in this kind of context, although I am ultimately swayed by the fact that this is publicly available information. At a certain point, we have already made a decision as a society that this information, who owns a gun, what their name is, where they live, this information should be out there. The only thing this newspaper has done is to go out and collect it. Now, if we want to take a step back and say that information should be signed, it should be locked away and sealed, fine, but right now, we have already made a decision as a society that this is public information.
But look, again, it's a different matter of if people want to go out and look for it on the internet, that's one thing. But in this context, in the wake of the Sandy Hook tragedy, where people are very upset about guns in the community, about gun owners, about people like Nancy Lanza, I think when you publish people's names and addresses in that way, in that context, you really make them into targets, and that's unfair. I'm reminded of former member of Congress from Virginia, Tom Perriello, when he was running for for re-election, someone published what they thought was his home address on a blog locally, and a person went to that address and cut the gas line there. It was actually Tom Perriello's brother's house, who had children. Fortunately, they were out, and thank God no one was injured. But I just think you have to be really careful. And again, that was publicly known information, but opening people up to be targets like that and treating them like criminals, they're not sex offenders. They're law-abiding people who went to the trouble.
But Krystal, isn't there an issue with, if you are moving into a neighborhood, if you're moving into a community, isn't that a valuable piece of information to know potentially if you have children, if you're going to be raising?
And I don't understand why you're assuming they're being treated like criminals because they publish their name.
But that's fine. Why do we need the names and addresses?
Well, if you're moving into
specifically the name and address.
Well, I think
general information about the area is one thing, but the specifics of where people live, I don't think that's okay.
I don't think
whether you have the name or not, if you're moving into a development and you find out it's 2 houses down or 3 houses down and there's a stockpile of weapons there, I think that's valuable.
So is it important to you to own a gun and also be secretive that you own that gun and nobody else can know that you have it? So people might come into your house and they're not aware that you have that?
It's important that people who are law-abiding are not treated like criminals and their privacy exposed.
This is not being treated like criminals.
Just for owning a firearm. It is. I mean, who else is named and shamed like this? Who else is named and shamed like this? The only group I can think of is sex offenders. It's not okay.
I don't see how this is shaming.
If you are this
kind of thing has been done before. I can think of examples in Massachusetts, for instance, when there was a group trying to put an anti-gay marriage referendum on the state ballot. You got to go collect signatures. So they put the name. Anybody who signed that petition, that's a public act, and their names were publicized by groups opposed to it.
We just had Sasha Eisenberg on the show. They send out to people who you voted for, when you voted, when you didn't vote. That's a way of shaming. We put out the list of people who donated to different candidates. So we let our neighbors know what we're doing in various different ways. This is another way like that. I don't understand why you assume this is shaming.
Publishing in the newspaper in this context is a totally different thing entirely. And frankly, I think this sort of thing really undermines the liberal argument for gun control, because it allows the right to caricature us as we want to name and shame you. We think that responsible gun owners are criminals.
The NRA is already doing that. The NRA is already fear-mongering against Obama and the left when Obama is only doing things to allow people to carry more pistols.
Privacy. We are the ones stoking fear in this instance.
We are not stoking fear. The NRA does that. That's their whole job.
I think I can settle this argument because SC over here is trying to say something. She says, I agree with Stephen Touré.
Whoa!
No.
Didn't see that one coming.
Krystal,
sorry, you're outvoted.
Sorry, Krystal.
I don't think SC is ever going to take a day off.